What do you think I'm more worried about right now? My pee or my poop?
You've been pretty focused on both, but
Well, I've been
yesterday, pee.
Yeah, for sure. Yesterday was
Don't put this on the podcast, please. I'm begging you.
I don't know. I feel like I'm due for a poop day.
Are you going to explain your theory yesterday?
Okay.
How there's something magically wrong with your pee, but only when it's in the toilet.
Wow.
And when you pee in a jar, it's fine. But then when it's in the toilet, it's bad. But
don't make me into
because of your pee and not because of the toilet.
Don't tell our dear listeners that I'm a jar peeing guy.
You brought it up.
That's a
I don't think you should put any of
type
this.
Of guy.
I know, and I'm terrified. But I just want you to reckon.
You're trying to Howard Hughes me.
I want you to reckon.
Trying to Howard Hughes me for the podcast.
I want you to reckon with your flawed thought process so that you can try to get it under control.
All right.
You did a controlled experiment, and the logical conclusion would be that something in the toilet is causing...
Hold on, we need some context here.
Okay, here's the context. Yesterday morning, while I was still in bed, you said, come here and look at this. And you were crouched over the toilet with your cell phone flashlight shining onto the water. And you were saying, look, there's something in it. There's a gray sediment in my urine. Come look. Okay, so...
That's all
That's
true.
where you want to start the story.
Yeah.
And then what would you say happened after that?
Wow, I love that we start every podcast in the most off-putting possible way.
It's really fucked up, and you should get professional mental health counseling and
Look,
not...
Men would rather imagine that there's sediment in their urine than go to therapy. I think that's clear. In any case, long story short, there wasn't sediment in my urine. If the careful listener would notice that Allison emphasized that I was shining a bright cell phone light into the toilet, and in fact casting a dark shadow onto the basin of the toilet. But it took me about 8 hours to figure out that was the case. So those are pretty harrowing 8 hours.
Except that, again, I told you, I was like, here's a jar. If you're going to keep doing this, pee in the jar and look for this mysterious sediment in the jar. And then when I came home from the lab, you told me the sediment is still there, but only when I pee into the toilet. It's not in the jar, but I still believe in my sediment hypothesis. And that's when I really...
You really lost it.
Realized that we were in deep trouble.
Yeah, I mean, your eyes widened, and I thought that I had lost you in that moment. Or I thought that you thought you had lost me in that moment.
I mean, again... Probably most people, if their partner wakes them up by saying, come look at this, and the whole scene that I previously described, they wouldn't immediately say, I encourage you to engage with this by peeing into a jar henceforth.
Listen,
that is evidence of how weird I am. But I thought that an experiment would convince you.
Listen, would you be okay with me behaving like this if I also were
as rich as Howard Hughes?
An aviation tycoon like Howard Hughes? You would. You would consider that a fair trade-off?
Absolutely not. No, that's just evidence that being rich allows you to sink deeper and deeper into your own mental problems. Everyone who is that rich is actually deeply troubled.
Yeah, undoubtedly.
Because they can't help it. They're so cushioned from reality that they can do no experiments to convince themselves that their urine is not full of a mysterious sediment.
I ultimately was convinced.
That is like approaching Morgellons syndrome. You were convinced only because I then panicked and realized.
Well, when I saw the scared look in your eyes, then I reevaluated it all. Yeah.
But why couldn't you reevaluate the evidence on its own merits? Why did it require my terror? I still feel this is a problem.
Sometimes that's what it takes.
Yeah, it does seem like multiple years of living in a global pandemic has eroded many people's mental health in various ways, but yours in a very, specific
particular way. Yeah.
That I think you should deal with somehow.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm getting therapy. It's been years. I've had therapy. It's just, these things are not at one's fingertips these days quite as easily. So, but I'm doing it. You know who really needs some therapy? Our fucking rich ass neighbors.
I mean, we've had no further interactions with them directly.
It's true, but Goudy Bold Italic on Twitter has encouraged us to continue beefing with our neighbors and to perhaps have a spin-off podcast about our continuing conflict with our rich neighbors.
I don't think this story was on the podcast, but we've had a very small update on that front. It's more of a missed opportunity to continue the beef.
Yeah.
Which is that when we disposed of our Christmas tree following Epiphany, which is when you will permit us.
I demand that we retain our Christmas tree through Epiphany. That's right. It's a mortal sin if you don't.
The various yard kids who were certainly the ones setting off the fireworks in the first place.
Yep.
Came by dragging several other decrepit Christmas trees.
Dry tinder Christmas trees.
That's right. Knocked on the door and asked if they could take our Christmas tree. And I said, "Do your parents know about this?" And they said, "Yes."
Yeah, sure do.
And I said, "All right, if they're fine with it, I'm fine with it." Because
you learn pretty early that if another adult asks, "Are your parents fine with this?" that the answer is universally, yes, they know and applaud what I'm doing. And what they're doing is definitely setting a big fire with these trees.
Oh, yeah. And what I wish I had said was, yeah, you can have it if you set off some more fireworks and make sure the debris lands on their yard, or set your bonfire on their yard.
Yeah,
you can burn these trees, do it over there.
Yeah, looks like a nice spot.
But no, I just said, fine, whatever, I don't care.
Man, I wish I could have seen what they did with those.
Well, I'm a little surprised we don't now have beef with an additional neighbor. Like, no one else has come to knock on the door being like,
why did you give our kids?
Yeah.
I mean, I assume they made some sort of mega tree and then burned it.
Yeah, I think probably they made a pile of all the discarded trees they could find and burned it.
Because they hate
our
Christmas.
Freedom.
Oh, I was going to say Christ. They were doing something like quasi-pagan maybe with it.
I just like accusing people of hating our freedom. If they hate any intangible concept,
I like to accuse people of taking Christ out of Christmas.
Wow, yeah, that is what they were doing. You're right.
Yeah, for sure. My mother wears a pin at Christmas time that says "Keep Christ in Christmas."
Oh no!
But she doesn't know what that means. She doesn't understand the right-wing context of it. She just thinks it's nice.
Yeah.
So they've tricked her. Unfortunately, Mom, if you're listening to this, it's a nice pin, but you should know that bad people like that you're wearing it.
It's like wearing a Choose Life shirt and being like, yeah, that's nice.
Life, that's nice. Everybody likes life, yeah.
Well, you're not Howard Hughes. You're Roman.
And you're Allison, and this pile of smoldering holiday tinder is seedy business. It's seedy business. It's seedy business.
Wow, this is going to be coming out in February. That's pretty late to have any sort of holiday relevance, but
I don't know.
But here we are.
Well, it's pretty late to have any holiday relevance, but don't forget that my parents are keeping their Christmas tree up until we visit them in March.
It's not a real tree.
No.
Yeah, because that would be dangerous.
Yeah. Speaking of setting fire to a Christmas tree. No, it is a fake tree. Still an unusual practice, but very nice. All right, well, we're recording here. It is it's about 5 p.m. on a Sunday afternoon. You know, a few weeks ago, it would have been pretty dark at this time, but now, we still got the sun shining through our front window here.
It's a nice sunny hour.
It's a nice sunny hour, casting its glow upon our house plant, keeping it alive, perhaps.
Looks pretty good.
It is looking pretty good. We had our first and I feel fairly confident saying only freeze of the year last night. We're recording this. Yesterday was the day of the big blizzard for New England, but it was very cold overnight here too. It got down to 32 degrees according to my phone.
Just barely freezing. But we did bring in the kumquat tree. It's been looking a little. Yeah, I think it's been a little too cold for it. Not in general. If we'd had sort of what historically winter has been in this region, it would have been fine. But it was exposed to a couple weeks of
it was like 80 degrees, and then
very warm
fairly rapidly it got cold. It's going to be warm again here soon. But we did bring it into the garage for a couple nights to try to get it. We didn't want to. We were contemplating bringing it into the house, which we keep at between 74 and 76 degrees in the winter, which I know sounds very wasteful to most people who are listening to this, but you have to understand that we buy ourselves, like carbon credits, we buy ourselves the ability to keep our heat at 74 to 76 degrees in the winter by keeping our air conditioning at 82 degrees in the summer.
83.
Yeah, I guess that's true. 83 degrees in the summer.
But the cold tile floors here make a big difference. They make it cooler.
It's true.
In the summer as well as in the winter.
Yeah. I mean, the cultural consensus for winter house temperatures in the United States of America is somewhere between 64 and 68 degrees, typically, is what I've heard. And then I guess you just have to wear 100 sweaters in your house at all times.
That's what they want it to be in the summer, too, though. They want it to be 68 degrees all year round, I think. We are tropical animals. That's just how it is. I don't know what to tell you. I don't know why people want to be cold all summer long.
You have to understand that
not natural.
83 degrees is our summer temperature is a compromise temperature between what Allison would like, which is 84 degrees, and what I would like, which is probably, 78 to 80 degrees in the summer. So naturally, the average of those two temperatures is 83 degrees.
Okay, 83 degrees is what
God intended.
Isn't that what the EPA said you should do?
The outcry about that online was ferocious. But yeah. It's
sorry that I'm objectively right according to the...
Yeah, sorry that you're more moral than other people. All right, anyway, it was a cold overnight. It is a nice sunny day, though, now, maybe 60 degrees outside or so. Allison, what is in the garden?
Really nothing. It's been very cold and very wet all week, and so nothing additional has been planted or done. It does seem like we're about to get a pretty dramatic turn in the weather.
I guess we got some more soil. We're definitely on the brink of planting some stuff.
Yeah, for sure.
By the next time we speak, I bet we will have planted some stuff. There's not really much of what's in the garden right now.
It's just been very demoralizing here. It's just sort of like failed in so many different ways.
We had a nice garden in North Carolina.
We really did.
Yeah.
And
when I met you, you had a nice garden, nice, wild, insane garden sort of in the back of your house.
That I 100% built from scratch. None of that existed when I moved into that place.
It was great. I remember you bringing me around soon after I met you to show me, and it was just like, I remember there being like a dozen different types of mint and stuff. It was great. Hope we can get back there. Okay, so today's catalog, we're sort of doing I would say a mini arc here. Last week, or I guess 2 weeks ago, we did R.H. Shumway's catalog, which of course is a zombie catalog owned by Jung Seeds. We're going to do another one of the army of catalogs owned by Jung Seeds this week. And maybe even one more. You got to make it probably a 3-part arc.
Wait, is it a zombie catalog or should we think of it as a ghost catalog? Like a ghost kitchen?
Yeah, explain the ghost kitchen concept for those who don't know about it.
Right, so the ghost kitchen is a thing that's sprung up during the COVID-19 pandemic where a company, typically like a quick service place, so like a place
like
where people don't
Applebee's
normally, right, they don't have a drive-through or
Yeah.
something, but it's like kind of junky mainstream chain
an Olive
food.
Garden, an Applebee's, a Chili's.
And they've taken the opportunity to create, essentially they rebrand their own food, but they call it something you've never heard of to make it seem like it's a local business.
This is for the purposes of being on like DoorDash
apps.
or Uber Eats or something.
So you might see, oh, this new
Oh,
Italian restaurant
right.
is in my area. I'll try their food. And then
Vito's artisanal, linguine or something. And then
Right.
it turns out it's
It's
made
Olive
by like
Garden.
Olive Garden. Yeah. Yeah, so that's a ghost kitchen. So yeah, I guess what you're saying is all of these catalogs, the seeds come from the same place, but they
right.
and of course they bought all of these names up. They didn't invent these catalogs whole cloth or anything like that. They're pre-existing catalogs with their own identities and histories and whatnot. And they bought them up and have in some ways kept their identities intact, but their warehouse of seeds is just the one warehouse of seeds, right?
Is that factually correct?
Well, they're all based out of
physically
Randolph,
located-
Wisconsin.
Okay.
Yeah, so I assume yes that is factually
That sounds
correct.
right then.
But this podcast is about the catalogs, right? Not about the company. So I
Absolutely.
think we can still sort of give this catalog a once over here. So this is the Vermont Bean Seed Company. So they were founded in 1976 by Guy Alfred Thomas III. Guy. Guy?
Probably Guy. If it's Alfred Thomas III, I bet
Probably
it's Guy.
yeah. They were, headquartered in Fairhaven, Vermont. So, as you might expect from a guy named Guy Alfred Thomas III, he was a moneyed gentleman. He had a 360 acre. So I guess he initially made I think he went to school in New York City and worked for some sort of big corporation that made plate glass. Then he made a bunch of money, went to Vermont, bought a 360 acre dairy farm in Castleton, Vermont. And I guess he got an itch to do something with that land. And in 1975, he planted his entire property with beans, becoming Vermont's largest grower of beans, sort of in one fell swoop. The crop failed terribly, apparently, because he didn't know how to grow beans.
Wow, what a swing.
And by all accounts, actively disliked farming. So he moved swiftly into selling bean seeds instead, largely grown from Idaho instead of Vermont, though it kept the Vermont name. It was originally founded as the Vermont Yankee Bean Seed Company, and he initially advertised, in Southern Living, and found that he did not get a lot of traction, not a lot of buyers, until he realized that he should probably remove the name Yankee from Vermont Yankee Bean Seed Company if he were doing primarily advertising in Southern Living. And apparently when he removed the name Yankee from his company name, the business exploded at that point. When Thomas was bought out in the 80s, he ultimately left the company, ended up running a successful chain of diners in Vermont. All this information about the company, I found backstory on this company to be harder to find maybe than any other catalog that I have encountered thus far. And really the only way that I got any of this story is that I found like a cached article from 1982 in Seed Savers Exchange. And I'll link to this article. It's a piece. It's a really lovely and I think lovingly written piece. It's the sort of long form journalism that not only would you, I mean, Seed Savers Exchange is a great catalog, but this is, I don't know, I'm sort of eyeballing it, but it's several thousand words probably as a piece. And it's just the kind of thing that isn't in catalogs or even really newspapers, apart from a couple of them these days. And it's a really nice piece that profiles Guy Thomas's founding of Vermont Bean Seed Company and contrasts that with another bean seedsman at the time, who was named John Withy. The framing is that Guy Thomas was a very good and shrewd businessman who didn't know anything about farming or beans or whatever, but ended up with this company. But John Withy was sort of a real bean passionist.
A real bean passionist.
Yeah, that's not good.
No, that seems like you should put that on a t-shirt.
Okay. But like a terrible businessman. I'll just summarize briefly the story about John Withy that's told here just because I like it so much. So the man always loved beans. But apparently in 1970, this is John Withy again, not Guy Thomas. So this is an aside here, but John Withy was hosting a bean party for a dozen or so friends at his home in Massachusetts. It was going to be like a big bean feast, I guess. And I guess at that point, the consensus was the tastiest cultivar you could use for beanhole beans is a Jacob's Cattle, which is a medium-sized slender white bean that is splashed with bright maroon colors. It's also known as Coach Dog, Dalmatian, and Trout. But I guess when he went looking in 1970 for the purposes of this party for the beans, he could not find any of these beans within 50 miles. And he got a real bug in his craw. Is that the phrase? Bug in his ass?
Bee in his bonnet?
Got a real bee in his bonnet.
I'm not sure what you're trying to say, but
he ended up getting...
These idioms are pretty weird.
He ended up getting...
But that's the one where there's a bug in something.
Sure. He ended up getting these, I guess, soldier bean, like little white navy beans for the party. His friends told him they were the best beans they'd ever eaten, but he was fucking pissed off because he couldn't find these Jacob's Cattle beans. So he started collecting beans at that point.
Wow. Remember early in the pandemic where there was that guy who would never jeopardize the beans?
Yeah. What was that?
It was on Reddit. I think it might have been on like r/relationships or something.
Bean husband?
Well, you're thinking of Bean Dad.
Bean Dad.
There was also Bean Dad. That was more recent. But this was on like r/relationships
the burying
or something.
the beans in the backyard.
Where,
a
guy was like, I bought all these cans of beans because of the pandemic.
Right,
and then my girlfriend buried them in the yard. And we had a huge fight where she screamed, I would never jeopardize the beans.
All right, we'll find this and read this at the end of this podcast. But all right, so he began obsessively hoarding beans. Within 6 years, he'd accumulated more than 100 different kinds. He stored them in a cool, dark closet. He had a sort of a eclectic system of maintaining them in matchboxes, plastic bread bags, and discarded paper cups. He retired in 1976 and devoted more of his time to beans at that point. He formed a nonprofit organization. He called it Wanigan Associates. And for an annual fee of $2, he began publishing a quarterly newsletter about beans. So this was not a seed catalog.
Just a loving tribute.
It was a loving newsletter about beans where you could pay $2 annually and he would send you this catalog.
Can we find any of these?
Yeah, it's difficult. I'm continuing to try to look, but I haven't had any success thus far. And For this price, a member could select from his newsletter any 2 cultivars he talked about, and he would send along, he would mail back beans for them to grow, often sending other varieties as well, as apparently. And he encouraged the members to seek out other heirloom beans and send them to him. This is the point at which his life gets out of hand, because he started getting a fuck ton of beans sent to him, an overwhelming number of beans. This article says the previously friendly relationship between Withy and his mailman began to decay. His mailman began to decay. Instead of a few beans arriving now and then, he began receiving several pounds a day. And apparently they began to dominate. He had to empty closets of his house. His wife was pissed off at him because he took all the clothes out of their closets to house beans. And it really came to a head when he had 1,200 cultivars at one point here in the late 70s. But then he got sick, and I guess he had to be in the hospital for a couple weeks. And hundreds of envelopes full of beans piled up in his house. Wanigan Associates, says John Withy today, was my downfall. And I guess at that point he contacted Seed Savers Exchange, and they fucking bailed him out. They came and sorted through his catalog and collection and took samples of all the cultivars for storage at their special facilities and whatnot. So they bailed him out of his situation where beans were completely overtaking his home. But anyway, that's a little aside about John Withy. But back to Vermont Bean Seed Company. If you're interested in sort of the structure of what companies own what catalogs, I did discover a page on Dave's Garden that's their Who Owns What page. Which is very interesting. I'll link to that also. But like I mentioned, this as well as, Jung Seeds being the umbrella company, as well as, owning R.H. Shumway and Totally Tomatoes and this and a variety of other ones. You can also look up other aspects of who owns what. I did also find a post that I want to read. It was from homesteading.com, a 2005 post that asked the question, are all seed companies the same? And there's a response on it from someone who seems like he's in the know. And he responds to this question, you're correct in that Jung's owns Vermont Bean and Shumway. Shumway, Seymour's, and Totally Tomatoes were previously owned by a Wayne Hilton, who bought the names only for a few $1,000s. So this gives us more context on what we talked about last week too. But they're previously owned by a Wayne Hilton who bought the names only for a few $1,000s. Vermont Bean was acquired by him, quote, via a hostile takeover.
Whoa.
Yeah, I could not find more information about this. I'll continue to try to look for what this could possibly mean, that Vermont Bean was acquired via a hostile takeover. But that's what's being claimed here by a person who seems to have some information. When Hilton decided he couldn't run a seed company properly, all the pieces were for sale. Due to a long-time personal friendly association between the founders of both Jung's and Shumway's, Jung's felt that they could rescue Shumway's rather than see it vanish entirely. However, it was a hard bargain as they had to accept all the other companies as well. So I guess it was a package deal where they wanted Shumway's, which is a, old and storied catalog with its own, unique and identifiable aesthetic, like we talked about last time. But they had to get all these other companies in the package deal as well. Then he says, we won't even go into the massive phantom seed inventory, which was also involved and which made it terribly difficult to fulfill orders from all those stocks. So that's sort of, we mentioned last week that they, at one point realized they didn't have any of the seeds that they were offering and had to go to individual private, this is R.H. Shumway's, go to individual private growers to sort of rebuild their collection. I guess that's sort of true across the board with these catalogs. Okay, well, what do you think about this catalog aesthetically?
It's a real meh of a catalog aesthetically.
Why do you think so? Do you want to describe the cover?
It's a collage of images. So there are 8 small pictures and 1 large picture. They're all sort of meh images.
The 8 are so there are 4 small ones lining the top and 4 small lining the bottom, and then in the middle is the large picture.
And so like a number of them they look sort of blurry or out of focus. They don't look particularly composed. 2 of them, the largest one is of 2 hands holding a bunch of harvested green beans.
Mm-hmm. I will say about this picture that this is a sort of a, it's supposed to look like a dirty, weathered hand. I mean, it's a photograph, so they are dirty, weathered hands. Like they were digging around in the dirt for him. I will say that I can see the damaged cuticles of this person holding these beans. As a person with damaged cuticles myself, I feel I'm affirmed by this damaged cuticle representation.
But then there's also this one where the top right corner image is of a hand holding 3 corn ears.
Yeah, it looks real stupid.
And what it really reminds me of, do you remember that person on the internet who had a website where she would critique dick pics?
Yes.
And there was a category of dick pic. Like you could send her your dick pic.
This is so fucking good.
And then she would aesthetically critique the image.
This is from an earlier, more wholesome era of the internet, which just sounds weird to say, but I want to say it's from like 2014 or something.
Yeah.
What was this called?
I think it was Critique My Dick Pic. Specifically, she did not offer critiques of the dick, only of the pic.
Right. That all dicks are as good or bad as any other dick, according to this critiquer.
But she would critique the composition and lighting and, Anyway, there were certain categories or archetypes of dick pics, and one of them that she referred to as the log is where it's just sort of flopped into the palm of your hand, and then it's just an extreme close-up of dick flopped into your hand. And that is what this photo of 3 small ears of corn flopped into a hand reminds me of that type of dick pic. And I mean, there's one on the bottom row that's of some potatoes, and it just looks sort of out of focus and like nobody really thought about, I don't know, it's brown potatoes on a brown wooden background. There's a photo of some other green beans, but they're on a pile of dirt. So I can only think about like, why would you want to get those beans dirty? I don't know. I just don't think whoever took these photos or selected these photos to be the cover of the catalog really cared that much. They were just like, we need some photos.
Yeah, and I suspect it's the same situation as R.H. Shumway's, where there's no budget or person who's taking new photographs at this point. Like, these must be reused photographs from other contexts, or maybe Jung. I mean, Jung's is not a zombie catalog or a ghost catalog. That is, maybe these were taken as part of the Jung's project, some of these, but otherwise they're just presumably reusing photos year after year now.
I don't know. The printing itself looks sort of low quality. There's nothing that I find very appealing about their logo. The Home Garden catalog, spring 2022, it's just like...
looks very generic.
It's as generic as it possibly could be. It's sort of a brown banner with white type, and it's like a sans serif, all caps, slightly italic font, maybe like 20-point size or something. Like, it's not actually big enough to be a masthead. I don't know, whatever. They don't care. I don't care.
The paper is, the size of the catalog is like 8.5 by 11-ish.
Yeah. And it's just sort of middle of the road magazine.
Right.
Glossy, but like the cheapest kind.
It's interesting to me that, I mean, a lot of catalogs have gone to just PDF these days. And it's interesting to me that despite these being zombie/ghost catalogs, they're still printing them.
Yeah, they could just
They could just be PDFs.
Be online only.
Yeah.
But they must get enough of their business. They must think at least enough of their business comes from the catalog that it's worth it to keep sending them out.
Yeah. I mean, I could see, although I think Shumway's looks like looks like chaotic shit these days. I mean, I could see why they'd want to keep printing that one because it's got like a really specific aesthetic, but this one does not. This one is like extremely generic.
Yeah, there's really not that much to even say about it. It's all of its choices aesthetically are just like as default and middle of the road as possible.
Yeah, so the pages of this catalog are, I would say, mostly 2-column format where on one side there'll be a description, a column of descriptions. On the other side, there'll be 2 columns of images. Some of the pages are a little different. Some of the dry bean section it's a 4-column setup where one of the columns is images and then 3 of the columns are descriptions. But, like you said, it's nothing to write home about. It's all pretty standard. Shall we read a few descriptions?
Oh, yeah.
I'd be interested. I've noted that they, in finding a few remarks made by Guy Thomas from their early business, that they appeared to pride themselves on their Vermont cranberry bean. So I thought maybe we would read that description.
Go for it.
An old-time New England heirloom dating back to the 1700s. Considered the most attractive of all dried beans. Superb quality, reliability, and hardiness make it our most popular bush shelling bean. Useful as either a fresh shell bean, 60 days, or a dry bean, 85 days. Brightly colored, red mottled, 6-inch long pods on vigorous, upright bush-type plants. Sweet, succulent flavor is wonderful in soups, baking, and in a variety of other recipes. What does it mean for a flavor to be succulent? Like that seems to me to be more of a
texture.
I was going to say a designator of quality than
a flavor per se.
Yeah.
I agree.
Like it basically just means it's good, I think. I mean, the dictionary definition is tender, juicy, tasty. Right? So they're good tasting. It's a nice word, but I'm just not sure it's not like saying sweet, which means something.
Right. Well, and 2 of those words are texture words.
Yeah, right.
Not to get hung up on me being right. But.
The other one I was interested in reading was the Jacob's Cattle, which they offer. And you might remember it was the one that when we were talking about John Withy, that's the one that he was trying to get for his party and couldn't find. And that led him into a descent into bean madness.
Jacob's Cattle, 85-day bush. Also known as trout bean, coach dog bean, Dalmatian bean, or Anasazi bean. Old but origin unknown. Favored by cooks in baked bean recipes because the beans soak up flavors superbly while retaining their shape. Pure white beans with deep maroon splashes on 24-inch plants. Use as a shell bean or dry bean.
When I look at that picture, like the Dalmatian reference really rings true to me.
Sure. How about the Vermont Appaloosa? Vermont Appaloosa, 80-day bush. Although compact, 18 to 24 inches, they frequently develop short runners. Green pods are flat, 5 inches long and a ½ inch wide, and contain 4 to 6 kidney-shaped seeds mottled purple and white, with many variations occurring in the mottling, like the rump of an Appaloosa pony. Can be snapped when young, but usually dried and shelled.
Wow, like the rump.
You haven't thought about a pony rump?
No, I haven't. I'm not a My Little Pony sex guy, so brony. Was that what the bronies?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, or just
they would dispute that definition.
They're sex guys. I haven't also just the word rump I haven't really thought about since Violent J said, is it Violent J or is it the other one?
I don't know. If it's Shaggy Two Dope or Violent J.
Yeah.
Isn't it Shaggy Two Dope is the other one?
Yeah. Fuck a rainforest. Fuck Forrest Gump. You probably like it in the rump.
I bet it's violent, Jay. I don't know.
Probably, yeah. One of them has heart disease now because they're old, like we're old, and like
And by
everybody's
we're
old.
talking about the insane clown.
Yeah,
posse.
right. Everybody knows
Whoop whoop to all my juggalos and juggalettes.
Yeah, fuck this shit. All right. Before we go, I did just want to mention briefly that I did Instagram DM Gerald Stratford recently and ask him.
Wow, you slid into those DMs.
I slid into his DM. I did some, careful sexting the way that you would do with an aging gentleman.
Did you send him a picture of an ear of corn?
I did
into
the
palm of
log.
your hand?
Yeah, I did the log for him. But I wanted to ask him if he had any favorite seed catalogs, and he did respond with two.
Wow, breaking news!
Yeah, breaking news. This is we are breaking this news. I don't think he has been asked this in interviews before, but specifically he mentioned D.T. Brown and Medwins of Anglesey, which are two British seed catalogs. So I'm going to try to sort of dig into those and see if we can get a copy. Maybe we'll talk about them at some point. It looks like Medwins of Anglesey has a PDF catalog. D.T. Brown, when you go to their site and go to their request catalog copy, it says, well, they'll send them to you if you're in the UK, but not if you are not in the UK, and it says no exceptions.
Oh, wow. They're very...
Yeah, so I might have to buy some sort of gray market D.T. Brown catalog. We'll see.
Well, if anyone has access to
a D.T. Brown catalog, let us know. All right, and if you're so inclined, you can elect to follow us on Twitter at @CDBusiness or on Instagram at CDBusinessPod, or email us at cdbusinesspod@gmail.com. Let us know if you'd like to talk about a particular catalog. Contact us about anything you would like. We'll be delighted to talk about whatever. And assuming that you have been served them by a company named Philippe's Trattoria that is really an Applebee's, you should eat your vegetables.
We're all just doing the best we can.
Speak for yourself.
It's city business. It's city business. Boring talk about seeds, city talk between boys. Mind-numbing chatter about ovules and spores. We'll dig a ditch and moan and split the difference. City business.